Ladies and gentlemen, the title Machiavelli's Laws to Control Any Woman is designed to shock, and it should, because it reveals a dangerous misunderstanding not only of women but of Machiavelli himself. Niccolò Machiavelli never wrote a manual on controlling women. He wrote about power, fear, authority, and human behavior within political systems. The modern idea of using dark psychology to dominate women is not Machiavellian brilliance. It is a distortion of his philosophy and a misuse of power. Machiavelli believed that power survives only when it is maintained, not merely seized. He warned rulers that manipulation breeds resentment, and resentment breeds rebellion. Applied to personal relationships, this lesson is crucial. Control creates resistance, not loyalty. Those who claim they can psychologically dominate women rely on three false assumptions. First, they assume women are predictable and weak-minded. History proves otherwise. Women have led revolutions, sustained economies, and dismantled tyrannies. Any ideology built on the idea of female inferiority collapses under evidence. Second, they confuse fear with influence. Machiavelli himself warned that fear without respect is unstable. In relationships, fear produces silence, not commitment, compliance, not connection. Third, they mistake manipulation for intelligence. True strategic thinking requires understanding consequences. Psychological control damages trust, escalates conflict, and ultimately isolates the manipulator. Power that destroys its own foundation is not power, it is self-sabotage. If Machiavelli were alive today, he would likely criticize the modern obsession with dark psychology as lazy strategy. Real influence, he argued, comes from reputation, consistency, and understanding human dignity, not from tricks and coercion. The real lesson here is uncomfortable but necessary. No one can be controlled without cost, and the cost is always higher than the illusion of dominance. So instead of asking how to control women, a better and braver question is this: why do some people fear equality so much that they mistake domination for strength? Because history, philosophy, and human experience agree on one truth: power gained through manipulation is temporary. Respect earned through integrity is lasting. Machiavelli is misinterpreted. Machiavelli wrote about political power and leadership, not about controlling women. Using his name to justify dark psychology is a distortion of his ideas. Machiavelli is often misunderstood and misused, especially when his name is attached to modern ideas of manipulation or so-called dark psychology. Niccolò Machiavelli was a political philosopher writing in a time of instability, war, and fragile governments. His primary concern was how rulers gained, maintained, and lost power within states, not how individuals should dominate others in personal relationships. To claim that Machiavelli provided laws to control women is to fundamentally misread both his work and his intentions. He analyzed human behavior broadly, recognizing that all people, regardless of gender, are driven by fear, ambition, loyalty, and self-interest depending on circumstances. Nowhere did he single out women as a group to be controlled, nor did he advocate psychological manipulation as a moral ideal. Instead, Machiavelli described power as something practical and situational, warning that leaders who relied too heavily on deception or cruelty would eventually face resistance. Modern interpretations that link Machiavelli to gender-based domination strip his ideas of context and turn complex political analysis into shallow justification for unethical behavior. This misinterpretation is not accidental. It often serves those who want intellectual cover for insecurity, resentment, or a desire for dominance. By invoking Machiavelli, they attempt to sound strategic or philosophical, when in reality they are ignoring his deeper warnings about instability, backlash, and the limits of force. Understanding Machiavelli correctly means recognizing that he was explaining how power works, not celebrating manipulation as virtue. When his ideas are reduced to slogans about control, they lose their analytical value and become tools for misinformation. True engagement with Machiavelli requires critical thinking, historical awareness, and the honesty to admit that power exercised without legitimacy eventually destroys itself. Control creates resistance, not loyalty. Manipulation and domination may produce short-term compliance, but they ultimately lead to resentment, rebellion, and broken relationships. The idea that control can produce loyalty is one of the most persistent illusions in human relationships. While manipulation or dominance may appear effective in the short term, it ultimately generates resistance rather than genuine commitment. Machiavelli observed that power maintained solely through force or fear is unstable because people comply outwardly while resisting inwardly. This resistance does not always appear immediately. It often grows quietly as resentment, emotional withdrawal, or strategic defiance. In personal relationships, this dynamic is even more pronounced. When one person attempts to control another, the relationship shifts from mutual connection to a struggle for autonomy. The controlled individual may obey temporarily, but the bond becomes hollow, built on pressure rather than trust. Over time, this erodes emotional closeness and creates a desire to escape or reclaim independence. Control also strips relationships of authenticity. Loyalty that is forced is not loyalty at all, it is survival behavior. Machiavelli understood that people who feel oppressed will eventually seek opportunities to resist, betray, or withdraw when the balance of power changes. Applied beyond politics, this insight reveals why controlling behavior backfires. Instead of strengthening influence, it weakens it by creating an adversarial dynamic. The person exerting control must constantly escalate tactics to maintain dominance, which only deepens the cycle of resentment and conflict. Furthermore, relationships based on control are inherently fragile because they depend on constant enforcement. The moment control slips, the relationship collapses. Genuine loyalty, on the other hand, emerges from mutual respect, shared values, and voluntary commitment. These elements create stability because they do not rely on fear or manipulation to survive. Machiavelli's warning is clear. Power that breeds resentment undermines itself. Whether in politics or personal life, attempts to dominate others may secure short-term obedience, but they inevitably plant the seeds of rebellion. True influence does not demand submission, it earns cooperation. Fear is not real influence. Fear without respect is unstable. True influence is built on trust, credibility, and consistency, not psychological intimidation. Fear is often mistaken for influence because it produces quick, visible results. When people are afraid, they may comply, remain silent, or follow instructions without question. However, this surface-level obedience should not be confused with genuine influence. Machiavelli himself warned that fear without respect is fragile because it creates obedience only under supervision and collapses the moment power weakens. Fear does not persuade the mind or win the heart, it merely suppresses expression. In any relationship, influence rooted in fear eliminates honesty, initiative, and trust. People begin to hide their true thoughts, act defensively, and prioritize self-protection over cooperation. What appears to be control is actually distance. True influence operates differently. It allows disagreement without retaliation and loyalty without coercion. Fear-based dynamics, by contrast, encourage deception. When individuals feel threatened, they learn how to avoid punishment rather than how to contribute meaningfully. This creates a false sense of authority where the one wielding fear believes they are respected, while in reality they are merely tolerated. Machiavelli understood that rulers who relied solely on fear were constantly at risk, because fear turns into hatred when it becomes excessive. Hatred motivates resistance, whether open or subtle. In personal contexts, fear damages connection even faster. Emotional safety is essential for communication, vulnerability, and mutual growth. When fear is present, people withdraw emotionally, reduce engagement, and mentally prepare for escape. Influence disappears because influence requires voluntary participation. No one is truly influenced by someone they resent or distrust. At best, they comply until circumstances change. Moreover, fear demands constant reinforcement. It must be renewed through threats, punishment, or psychological pressure, making it exhausting and unstable. Respect, on the other hand, sustains itself through consistency and credibility. Machiavelli's insight remains relevant. Fear can be a tool, but it is a poor foundation. Influence that lasts is built on understanding human dignity, not undermining it. Where fear rules, loyalty fades. Where respect exists, influence endures. Dark psychology is weak strategy. Manipulation damages trust and isolates the manipulator. It is intellectually lazy and self-defeating, not a sign of intelligence or strength. The modern obsession with dark psychology is often presented as a mark of intelligence or strategic superiority, but in reality it reflects weak thinking and shallow understanding of human behavior. Manipulation relies on shortcuts, exploiting fears, insecurities, or emotional reactions instead of engaging with people as complex, autonomous individuals. While these tactics may create momentary advantage, they lack durability and adaptability. Machiavelli valued strategy that accounted for long-term consequences, yet dark psychology ignores this principle by prioritizing immediate control over sustainable influence. A strategy that collapses once its tricks are recognized is not clever, it is fragile. Manipulation also narrows the manipulator's options. When relationships are built on deception, every interaction becomes a performance that must be maintained. This creates dependence on escalation, more pressure, more tactics, more control to achieve the same results. Over time, this leads to isolation, as trust erodes and others become guarded or disengaged. Far from being powerful, the manipulator becomes trapped by their own methods, unable to form genuine alliances or receive honest feedback. Machiavelli understood that leaders who surrounded themselves with fear and deception eventually lost access to truth, which made them vulnerable to failure. Furthermore, dark psychology underestimates human awareness. People adapt, learn patterns, and recognize manipulation faster than those who rely on it expect. Once exposed, manipulation destroys credibility completely. Influence cannot survive without credibility. A person known for psychological games is avoided, not followed. What remains is control without consent, which is costly and unstable. True strategy requires patience, emotional intelligence, and ethical awareness. It involves understanding motivations, respecting boundaries, and building influence that does not need constant enforcement. Dark psychology fails because it mistakes cleverness for wisdom and dominance for strength. In the long run, it produces neither power nor respect, only resistance and distrust. Respect and integrity are lasting power. Power gained through coercion is temporary, but influence earned through integrity and mutual respect endures. Lasting power is not rooted in coercion, but in respect and integrity. While manipulation may offer the illusion of control, it cannot sustain influence over time because it lacks moral and emotional legitimacy. Machiavelli understood that power endures only when people believe it is justified or beneficial to them. Integrity creates this belief. When actions align with words and authority is exercised with fairness and consistency, people choose to cooperate rather than feeling forced to comply. This voluntary cooperation is the foundation of stable influence, whether in leadership or personal relationships. Respect cannot be demanded or engineered through tactics, it is earned through conduct. Integrity signals reliability, and reliability builds trust. Trust, in turn, allows influence to operate without constant pressure or surveillance. Unlike fear-based control, which requires continuous enforcement, respect sustains itself. People remain loyal not because they are afraid of consequences, but because they value the relationship or the leadership. Machiavelli warned that rulers who lost the respect of their people became vulnerable, regardless of how much force they possessed. This insight applies beyond politics. Relationships without respect are brittle and temporary. Moreover, integrity strengthens the one who holds power. It reduces the need for deception and defensive behavior, allowing clearer judgment and better decision-making. Those who act with integrity can adapt, listen, and correct mistakes without losing authority. Manipulators, by contrast, must protect their image at all costs, which often leads to paranoia and isolation. Respect also multiplies influence. People who feel valued are more likely to support, defend, and advocate for others willingly. This creates resilience that coercion can never achieve. Power built on integrity may grow slowly, but it lasts. Power built on manipulation may rise quickly, but it collapses just as fast. In the end, the strongest form of control is not domination, but the ability to lead without needing to control at all.